road. There you are, Your Excellency.
Catherine,
how are you?
I'm really well, and how are you?
I'm happy. I'm happy to be in Australia.
Well, welcome to the residence, and this is a taste of Australia here in Nairobi.
Yes.
And it's a taste I hope will inspire you to visit Australia.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to knowing your story, Soye.
Please, come in.
Thank you. Sir, you're most welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Catherine.
Thank you for having us here and your willingness to share your incredible story. You know, I can't wait for our audience to just get to know what I already know and maybe get surprised during this conversation. So tell me, sir, first of all, when did you come to Kenya?
I came here in November 2020 in the height of COVID-19. And to be frank, it was a refreshing surprise because we came from a pretty severe lockdown in Australia where the borders were closed and it was difficult to move around. And so when we arrived in November 2020, we found that it was actually less restrictive.
Yes.
So it was refreshing, to be honest.
Yeah. And it wasn't your first time in Kenya, though. You'd been here before.
Yes. First came here in December 2018. And I'd never been to East Africa before, been to other parts of Africa, but not East Africa. And I was just blown away by the dynamism that was in the streets here. And there was so much activity. And I remember going back and telling Helen, my wife, that, wow, that's a really exciting place and we should think about it as a future posting opportunity.
So you sent out the energy into the universe and you found yourself here 2 years later.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's track back to, you know, where this journey started and maybe just maybe a little bit lower than that, your childhood. Australia is obviously a very, very close friend to Kenya, and Kenyans in general got introduced to Australia through a TV show that's very popular and famous, Neighbours. And so even for me personally to just have this conversation with the High Commissioner of Australia to Kenya is quite something, because we all were glued to Neighbours back then. So is Australia what we think it is from watching that TV show? Is it better, maybe?
Well, it's a very good question, because I come from the same city that Neighbours was set in and filmed in, namely Melbourne, which is in the southeastern corner of Australia. And Neighbours was set in Ramsay Street. And it was very much about suburban life in Australia. And for me, growing up in the Melbourne suburbs, a lot of the street scenes they showed were very familiar. What most Australians experience growing up. There's some ideas that Australia is about the bush, the outback, the rural areas, but most Australians live in suburbs, in big cities.
Right.
And so Neighbours very much connected because people felt it was real life.
Yes. So you were born in Melbourne?
Yes.
Okay.
Way back in '63.
Oh, so you are as old as Kenya's independence.
Yes.
That's pretty cool. Okay, so what was it like growing up? What are some of your favorite childhood memories?
Well, I have fond memories of my childhood.
Okay.
I was the first of 4 siblings born to my mum and dad. My dad was a primary school teacher. My mum, once children were born, became a stay-at-home mum. And this was typical of families out in the suburbs. And at the time I was born, and they'd sort of recently purchased a new home. It was an outer suburb of Melbourne. No longer is the case. It's very much more like inner Melbourne, but it was at that time on the fringes. And we were surrounded by families of similar ages. It was what you would describe now as a sort of lower middle class upbringing, but one in which I just remember roaming the streets and having lots of fun. And so for me, I have fond memories of that time.
Yeah.
And enjoyed it very much.
Yeah.
And, you know, you go through school, and I went to just local government schools, the schools just down the road. And as you sort of grow older, you start developing and forming your own identity. And something that we did a lot of in Australia at that time was sport. So sport dominated our lives.
Yeah.
And so all the children of those ages you were quickly immersed in the sports that are very popular in Australia. Australian rules football in Melbourne is unique to Australia, but it dominates life in Melbourne.
So your love for Africa started, first of all, through watching this documentary. Yes. It's amazing how your life has come full circle, but we'll get there. I don't want to go ahead of myself.
But I used to love watching on television on Sunday nights a program in the early 70s called Wild Kingdom. And it was an American program. But what appealed to me were the animals that were not from Australia. And that's when I developed my love of the cheetah, because whenever they had a special program about the cheetah, I used to be riveted by that. And I still see the cheetah as my favourite animal.
Oh.
And so it was both people who were inspiring, but also the animals of the continent as well.
Right. Okay, high school, you know, were you a rebel? Were you a good boy?
No, I was always teacher's pet. For whatever reason,